What's up, y'all? You may have been watching my YouTube channel of this build that I've been working on for about 6 months. It's basically finished and the bike is, on the road and everything, but one thing I wanted to talk about is the wiring harness. I did the Ultima wiring harness on this bike because it basically had a disaster of a wiring setup. So I needed to start from scratch, and I wanted the basic conveniences of turn signals, brake light, tail light, horn, high beam, low beam, electric start, kill switch, things like that. And sure, you can do it, if you want to just run wires yourself. It's not all that difficult, I'm sure, to do each wire individually and things like that. But when I first started this project, I knew nothing about wiring a bike. So I went with the Ultima box, and you can see where I mounted it there. Found a nice nifty place right under the seat for it. And that's not really the issue that I want to discuss. The main thing is if you're considering doing this wiring harness, I recommend not only, of course, that you learn how to do proper soldering and heat shrinking and crimping and getting proper assortment of clips and clamps and all these little clips and things and the OEM-style connectors. That is the ticket right there, to use these type of connectors instead of some crazy twisting method or soldering each wire together method. Mainly because while you're testing this stuff and setting it up, and even later on, if you discover you have a problem, like I found out that a diode inside my little tail light here came loose on its soldering from its factory. Whoever created that thing didn't do a too good job of soldering the diode that creates the brake light feature of this LED light. So, the way I did my setup is with these OEM-style connectors. As you see here, you can get these, all over the internet and that sort of thing. And as far as doing each little connector inside the housing there, the camera won't focus. That you can get with a nice assortment of these types of clips. These little guys here, if it'll focus. These kind of, these little connectors are just a must. It won't focus. It's just a must to do, some good style connections that you can remove if you find out that you have a problem. So imagine if I had, created this whole setup that's coming to the rear section for my lighting. Imagine if I found out I had a problem of some sort. If I didn't use these types of connectors, I would have to cut everything, check everything in that method, resolder stuff back together. It'd just be a nightmare. So I highly recommend using the OEM style connections. And it just makes life so much easier in the end. That's what I used for basically everything throughout the bike. There's stuff underneath the tank, of course, that you can't see. But that's all I used was these styles of connectors. And it worked awesome. Because you never know. For me, I was a total rookie on wiring a motorcycle. You do all kinds of research and YouTube videos, searching and that sort of stuff. But until you've really done it, you don't know much of anything until you've experienced it. And that's been my experience, is use these OEM connectors, learn how to solder, learn how to heat shrink. I now solder and heat shrink just about everything I can get my hands on, instead of twisting and crimping and the old style, cheap method, whatever. And it'll make your life easier. Yeah, it costs a good bit of money to invest into a decent soldering kit you know, your third hand tool, all the proper stuff for soldering, flux and solder and brushes and different tips for your soldering gun. And of course, all the varieties of terminals and you just name it. I acquired so many things throughout this one project because I had no idea how to do much of any of it. So I wanted to make sure I had everything I could possibly get. So I'm not constantly going back to the store, you know, forgetting things and whatever. Anyway, the Ultima box works really well. It makes your life a lot easier if you want all the normal stuff on a motorcycle. Just follow your directions for that thing because it is very involved. But the directions are pretty good, and there's all kinds of tips on the internet for setting it up. And I make sure all my wires that come labeled from Ultima, I make sure that they stay exposed where they are labeled around my heat shrink tubing. That way, if I need to find out or troubleshoot something, I don't have to rip all this stuff clean off and start over again. I can just glance down there and know which wires are going to which section. And I also group the wires per what thing they're going to. Like just this cluster is going only to the rear signal section. Then you'll have another cluster that goes to your handlebar section, you know, left handlebar, right handlebar, starter button, your ignition box up in the front over there. You know, you'll keep all that stuff kind of organized accordingly. That way, if you have a problem with that one specific area, you don't have to rip apart everything you've done. You just troubleshoot the one cluster of wires that you're suspect, you know, is a problem. It'll make your life easier. It's not simple, but if you take your time and, you know, have someone help you, that helped me as well as having a helper, because there's so many wires involved that you just feel overwhelmed at first. And you'll, you know, if you can have a second brain to sort things out on what goes where and testing and retesting, and just, it can be overwhelming at first, but it's not so bad if you just knock it out, you know, little by little. And you can have a bike that has all the modern stuff on it. Anyway, that's about all I had. Happy riding. See ya.